Tiffany grabbed my wrist so hard I could feel her nails digging into my skin, leaving 4 perfect crescent-shaped marks that would bloom into bruises by morning. "You need to learn your place in this house, Violet," she hissed, her voice dripping, with venom that my son Nathaniel never seemed to hear. Little did she know that by the end of this story, I'd be leaving marks of my own on her precious bank statement. The bathroom mirror didn't lie, even when I wished it would. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I rolled up the sleeves of my cardigan and examined the fresh bruises on my forearms, deep purple fingerprints that told a story my 68-year-old body was getting tired of writing. This wasn't the first time, and I knew it wouldn't be the last, unless something changed. "Grandma Violet, are you okay in there?" The small voice belonged to my 7-year-old granddaughter Susan, Nathaniel and Tiffany's daughter. Sweet Susan, with her father's kind eyes and, unfortunately, her mother's sharp intuition. She'd been noticing things lately, the way I'd wince when putting on my coat, how I'd started wearing long sleeves even in the summer heat of our small Colorado town. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I called back, quickly pulling my sleeves down. "Just washing my hands." But I wasn't fine. Nothing about this situation was fine. I opened the bathroom door to find Susan standing in the hallway, her small face creased with worry that no child should have to carry. Behind her, I could hear Tiffany's voice echoing from the kitchen, sharp and commanding as always. "Nathaniel, your mother left water spots on my good glasses again. I've told her 1,000 times to dry them properly, but she just doesn't listen. At her age, maybe we need to consider whether she's still capable of helping around the house." My jaw clenched. Those weren't water spots. They were from the hard water that had been an issue in this house since before Tiffany ever set foot in it. But somehow, everything that went wrong in this house became my fault, my failing, my sign of declining competence. "Now, Tiffany," I heard my son's gentle voice, always the peacemaker. "Mom's been helping us so much since Dad passed. I don't know what we'd do without her. What they'd do without me. That was rich. What they'd do without my monthly Social Security check that mysteriously disappeared into their joint account for household expenses. What they'd do without my free babysitting while Tiffany went to her book club meetings that somehow always involved expensive shopping trips. What they'd do without the inheritance money from my late husband that I'd foolishly agreed to let them invest for me. "Come on, Susan," I whispered, taking her small hand in mine. "Let's go read a story in your room." As we walked past the kitchen, I caught sight of Tiffany leaning against the granite counter that my inheritance money had paid for, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the surface. At 32, she was everything I had never been: tall, blonde, seemingly effortless in her beauty. When Nathaniel had first brought her home 5 years ago, I'd been hopeful. My son deserved happiness after his difficult divorce from his first wife, but Tiffany had studied me like a chess player studies the board, identifying weaknesses and planning moves I couldn't see coming. "Oh, Violet," she said, her voice saccharine, sweet in that way that always made my skin crawl. "I hope you're planning to do something about that garden tomorrow. The neighbors have been commenting on how overgrown it's gotten. It's embarrassing." The garden. My garden. The one I'd tended for 40 years before arthritis made it painful to kneel and weed. The one she'd forbidden me from hiring help for because we need to watch our expenses, while she drove a BMW that cost more than most people's annual salaries. "Of course," I murmured, not trusting myself to say more. Susan tugged on my hand, and we escaped to her bedroom. As I settled into the small chair beside her bed, she climbed under her covers and studied my face with those serious brown eyes. "Grandma, why does Mommy get so angry at you?" The question hit me like a physical blow. How do you explain to a 7-year-old That her mother was a master manipulator who'd spent 3 years systematically isolating me from my friends, controlling my finances, and making me question my own sanity. How do you tell a child that the woman tucking her in at night was the same person who'd started pushing me down the stairs accidentally when no one else was around? Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, sweetheart, I said, opening the book. We'd been reading together. It's not your job to worry about it. But as I read about brave princesses and clever foxes, my mind wandered to the conversation I'd overheard yesterday. Tiffany had been on the phone in the study, the door slightly ajar, her voice low and urgent. No, Bradley, she's not ready yet. The old woman is still too sharp, too independent. But Nathaniel trusts me completely now. A few more months of documenting her episodes, and we can move forward with the plan. Bradley. I didn't know any Bradley, but the way she'd said the plan had sent ice through my veins. Episodes? What episodes? I was as mentally sharp as I'd ever been. Yes, I forgot things occasionally. Didn't everyone? But Tiffany had started keeping a notebook, documenting every time I misplaced my reading glasses or forgot whether I'd already added salt to the soup. Grandma? Susan's voice brought me back to the present. You stopped reading. Sorry, sweetheart. I smiled at her and continued the story, but my mind was racing. Tomorrow, while Tiffany was at her book club and Nathaniel was at work, I was going to do some investigating of my own. Because something told me that the marks on my arms were just the beginning, and if I didn't act soon, the next marks might be permanent. As I kissed Susan goodnight and turned off her lamp, I caught my reflection in her bedroom mirror. The woman, looking back at me, wasn't the frail victim Tiffany saw. She was a retired bank manager who'd spent 30 years detecting financial irregularities and protecting people's assets. It was time to remember who I used to be. It was time to fight back. DT. Next morning, I woke to the sound of Tiffany's voice drifting up from the kitchen, sweet as honey and twice as dangerous. She was on the phone again, and from the tone, I could tell she was performing for someone important. Oh yes, Dr. Alvin, I'm so worried about her, Tiffany was saying. Yesterday, she forgot she'd already taken her blood pressure medication and tried to take it again. If I hadn't caught her, who knows what could have happened? I sat up in bed, my heart racing. Dr. Alvin was my physician of 15 years, a man who'd seen me through my husband's cancer, my own recovery from a broken hip, and countless routine checkups. But I hadn't tried to double-dose my medication. In fact, I used a weekly pill organizer specifically to prevent such confusion. Yes, doctor, I think you're right. Family members are often the first to notice these cognitive changes. My mother went through the same thing before we had to move her to assisted living. Cognitive changes. The words hit me like a slap. I climbed out of bed as quietly as possible and crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear more. Memory. Lapses, confusion about dates, leaving the stove on. It's all there. Nathaniel and I are just trying to keep her safe, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. She gets so defensive when we try to help. Defensive. Of course I got defensive. When they treated me like a child who couldn't be trusted with basic tasks. But from downstairs, Tiffany's version sounded so reasonable, so concerned, so believable. We're documenting everything, of course. I keep a daily log of incidents. Yes, I think a cognitive assessment might be wise. Thank you so much, doctor. A daily log. A cognitive assessment. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed made my blood run cold. I retreated to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what I'd just heard. Tiffany wasn't just physically abusing me. She was building a case that I was mentally incompetent. But why? The answer came to me as I looked around the room that had been my sanctuary for the past 3 years. This house, the one Nathaniel and Tiffany lived in, had been purchased with the life insurance money from my husband's death. But it wasn't in their names, it was in mine. I'd wanted to help them, so I'd bought it and let them live here rent-free, planning eventually to leave it to Nathaniel in my will. My will, my Social Security, my pension. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My savings account that I'd let them help manage. Mom? You up there? Nathaniel's voice called from downstairs. Coming, sweetheart, I called back, quickly composing myself. In the kitchen, I found the picture of domestic perfection that Tiffany excelled at creating. She stood at the stove making pancakes, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, while Nathaniel sat at the table reading the newspaper. Susan was already dressed for school, her backpack neatly packed by the door. Good morning, Violet, Tiffany said without turning around. I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes. But I had to hide the blueberries because you know how you get confused about whether they're still good or not. I didn't get confused about blueberries. The ones in the refrigerator had been perfectly fresh yesterday when I'd suggested making pancakes for Susan, but now they were nowhere to be seen. That's thoughtful, I managed. Nathaniel looked up from his paper with a smile that reminded me so much of his father, it made my chest ache. How'd you sleep, Mom? Fine. Until I heard Tiffany on the phone with Dr. Alvin, I said, watching her shoulders tense slightly. Is everything all right? Oh, that. Tiffany turned around, her expression perfectly crafted, concern mixed with gentle embarrassment. I was just asking about some resources for families dealing with aging parents. Nothing to worry about. What kind of resources? I pressed. Nathaniel folded his newspaper, his brow furrowed with worry. Mom, we've been talking, and we're just concerned about some things we've noticed lately. What things? Tiffany slid a plate of pancakes in front of me, her hand briefly touching my shoulder in what anyone watching would perceive as a loving gesture. But I felt the pressure of her fingertips on one of yesterday's bruises, and I knew it was intentional. Well, she said, settling into her chair with her own plate. There was the incident with the stove last week. What incident? You left the burner on under the empty pan for over an hour. I came home from dropping Susan at school and the kitchen was full of smoke. I stared at her. That wasn't me. I didn't cook anything that morning. Nathaniel and Tiffany exchanged a look. The kind of look that said everything without saying anything. The kind of look that suggested I was confused, forgetful, possibly dangerous. Mom, Nathaniel said gently, you made scrambled eggs for yourself around 8. Remember? You said you were still hungry after breakfast. But I hadn't been hungry after breakfast. I rarely ate breakfast at all, preferring just coffee until lunch. And I certainly hadn't made scrambled eggs. I think you might be misremembering, I said carefully. See? Tiffany said softly to Nathaniel. This is exactly what I was telling Dr. Alvin about. Susan looked up from her pancakes, her young face troubled. Daddy, why does everyone keep saying Grandma forgets things? She remembers all my favorite stories. It's different kinds of memory, sweetheart, Tiffany explained, her voice patient and loving. Grandma's great at old memories, but new things are getting harder for her. The conversation continued around me, but I felt like I was watching it from outside my body. They were rewriting reality in real time, creating a version of events where I was the confused, declining elder who needed their care and supervision. After Nathaniel left for work and Susan for school, I found myself alone with Tiffany for the first time in days. She cleaned up the kitchen with practiced efficiency, humming softly to herself. Tiffany, I said finally, I need to ask you something. She turned to face me, her expression open and innocent. Of course, Violet. What is it? The stove incident you mentioned. I really don't remember making scrambled eggs that morning. Her smile was gentle, almost pitying. Oh, honey, that's exactly what we're worried about. As she left the room, I remained at the kitchen table, staring at my half-eaten pancakes. The gaslighting was so subtle, so expertly done, that even I was beginning to question myself. But one thing I knew for certain: I needed to start documenting everything, just like Tiffany was doing. The difference was my documentation would be the truth. That afternoon, while Tiffany was at her supposed book club meeting, I decided to do something I should have done months ago. I went through my own financial records. The manila folder I kept in my bedroom dresser felt thinner than it should have, and as I spread the documents across my bed, the first crack in Tiffany's carefully constructed facade began to show. My bank statements were missing. Not all of them. She was too clever for that. But the last 3 months of statements from my checking account were nowhere to be found. I always kept them in chronological order, a habit from my banking days, and the gap was obvious to my trained eye. Interesting, I murmured to myself, pulling out my cell phone. The automated banking system confirmed what I'd suspected. My checking account balance was significantly lower than I remembered. Not catastrophically low, but nearly $2,000 less than it should have been. I called the bank directly and spoke to Irene Martinez, a customer service representative who'd helped me before. "Mrs. Violet, yes, I can help you with that," Irene said after I explained I needed copies of my missing statements. "Actually, I do see some unusual activity on your account. Several large withdrawals over the past few months. Did you authorize cash withdrawals of $500 each on the 15th of May, June, and July?" My grip tightened on the phone. "No, I did not." "The withdrawals were made at the First National branch on Maple Street. Do you bank there regularly?" Maple Street was across town, near the shopping district where Tiffany liked to browse the expensive boutiques. I always used the branch near my house. "Irene, I need you to freeze any further withdrawals from that account immediately," I said, my banking instincts kicking in. "And I need to know, is there anyone else authorized to access my account?" There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Yes, ma'am. Tiffany Hartwell was added as an authorized user 3 months ago. According to our records, you came in with her and signed the authorization forms in person." The room tilted slightly. I had never, ever been to the bank with Tiffany. I had never authorized her to access my account. "Irene, I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said, switching to the authoritative tone I'd once used when training new bank employees. "I did not authorize that access. I have never been to your Maple Street branch with Tiffany Hartwell or anyone else. Someone has forged my signature." "Oh my. Mrs. Violet, this is quite serious. I'll need to transfer you to our fraud department immediately." 30 minutes later, I hung up the phone with a mixture of vindication and terror. The bank's fraud specialist, Mr. Bradley Chen, had walked me through the timeline. On March 15th, someone claiming to be me had come into the Maple Street branch with Tiffany, presented identification, and signed forms authorizing Tiffany's access to my accounts. Bradley Chen. The same first name as the person Tiffany had been talking to on the phone about the plan. "Mrs. Hartwell," Bradley had said, and now I realized why that conversation had sounded so professional. "We'll need you to come in tomorrow to formally report this fraud and provide a handwriting sample for comparison. In the meantime, we've frozen all account access except for your own." After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my bedroom, trying to process what I'd discovered. Tiffany hadn't just been manipulating my daily life, she'd been systematically stealing from me while building a case for my mental incompetence. But the identity theft was a mistake on her part. Banking fraud left paper trails, security camera footage, witnesses. The sound of a car in the driveway snapped me out of my thoughts. Tiffany was home from her book club, which apparently involved emptying my bank account. I quickly gathered my documents and locked them in the small safe my husband had installed in our bedroom closet years ago. Then I sat in my armchair by the window, a book in my lap, playing the role of the harmless, confused, elderly woman. "I'm home," Tiffany called out, her voice bright and cheerful. "How was book club?" I asked as she appeared in my doorway, several shopping bags in her hands. "Oh, wonderful. We're reading the most fascinating novel about family dynamics. She held up the bags with a sheepish smile. I may have gotten a little carried away at the boutique afterward, but I found the perfect dress for the church fundraiser next month. A dress that had likely been purchased with my stolen money. That's nice, dear, I said mildly. Tiffany, I was wondering, have you seen my bank statements? I can't seem to find the last few months. Her expression didn't change, but I caught the barely perceptible pause before she answered. Oh, you know what? I think I may have accidentally mixed them in with our household papers when I was organizing the office. I'll look for them tomorrow. That would be helpful. I like to keep track of my finances. Of course you do. She stepped into the room and sat on the edge of my bed, her posture casual, but her eyes watchful. Violet, I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you been feeling all right lately? You seem a little scattered. There it was, the gentle undermining, the subtle suggestion that my concern about missing bank statements was just another sign of my declining mental state. I feel fine, I said carefully. Why do you ask? Well, this morning you seemed confused about the stove incident, and now you're worried about bank statements that are probably just misfiled. Her tone was so kind, so reasonable. I just want to make sure you're not feeling overwhelmed. Before I could respond, Susan's voice echoed from downstairs. Grandma, can you help me with my homework? I should go help her, I said, standing. Up? Tiffany stood as well, blocking my path to the door just slightly. Actually, I think I should help her tonight. Math isn't really your strong suit anymore, is it? Math had been my strongest subject. I'd balanced bank ledgers for 3 decades, without a single error. I think I can manage second-grade arithmetic, I said, moving toward the door. Her hand caught my arm, gently but in exactly the spot where yesterday's bruises were darkest. The pressure was subtle, a warning disguised as affection. Let me handle it tonight, she said softly. You should rest. As I watched her walk downstairs to help my granddaughter, the granddaughter who was slowly being taught that Grandma was no longer capable of simple tasks, I felt something harden in my chest. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank and file a formal fraud report. I would demand to see the security footage of this supposed visit I'd made with Tiffany. I would compare the forged signature to my real one. But tonight, I would do something else. I would call my old friend Alvin, not Dr. Alvin, but Alvin Rodriguez, the retired police detective who'd helped me when my husband died. Alvin who'd warned me about financial predators who targeted grieving widows. It was time to stop playing defense and start gathering evidence. Because now I knew the truth. This wasn't just elder abuse. This was a sophisticated con game, and I was the mark. The next morning, I waited until both Nathaniel and Tiffany had left for work before making my move. Susan was safely at school, and I had approximately 6 hours to conduct my investigation without arousing suspicion. My first call was to Alvin Rodriguez. The retired detective answered on the second ring, his voice as gravelly as I remembered from our conversations after my husband's funeral. Violet, good to hear from you. How are you holding up? I need your help, Alvin, and I need you to listen to everything before you respond. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything: the physical abuse, the missing bank statements, the forged signatures, the systematic campaign to make me appear mentally incompetent. Alvin listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement. Jesus, Violet, he said when I finished. This is textbook financial elder abuse with a side of domestic violence. How long has this been going on? The physical stuff started about 6 months ago, but I think the financial manipulation has been happening longer. I just didn't notice because I trusted them. And your son doesn't know? Nathaniel thinks I'm starting to lose my mind. Tiffany's convinced him that every concern I raise is just confusion or paranoia. Alvin was quiet for a moment. Violet, I need you to understand something. What you're describing isn't just theft, it's conspiracy. If she's forged documents and enlisted help from this bank employee, we're looking at federal charges. But we need evidence. What kind of evidence? Documentation of everything. Photos of your injuries. Records of the financial theft. Audio recordings if you can manage them safely. And most importantly, we need to identify her accomplices. After hanging up with Alvin, I sat in my kitchen with a notebook and began documenting everything I could. Remember, every bruise, every incident Tiffany had reported, every time money had gone missing from my purse. The pattern that emerged was methodical and chilling. Around 10 o'clock, I received a call from the bank's fraud department. Bradley Chen's voice was professional but concerned. "Mrs. Hartwell, we've reviewed the security footage from March 15th. I need to ask you some specific questions about your appearance that day." My heart raced. "Go ahead." "The woman in the footage is approximately your height and build, wearing a blue coat and carrying a black purse. She's with a younger blonde woman who matches Tiffany Hartwell's description. However, the older woman keeps her face turned away from the cameras, and she's wearing large sunglasses and a hat that obscures most of her features. I don't own large sunglasses, and I've never worn a hat to the bank. That's what I suspected. Mrs. Hartwell, I believe someone impersonated you. We're going to need you to come in this afternoon to view the footage and provide a formal statement." After arranging to meet Bradley at 2 o'clock, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I started with Tiffany's home office, the converted spare bedroom where she claimed to do freelance graphic design work. The office was meticulously organized, almost obsessively so. File folders labeled with household categories, a pristine desk with expensive equipment, and a locked filing cabinet that immediately caught my attention. Using a paperclip and skills I'd learned from my late husband's lockpicking hobby, I managed to open it within minutes. Inside, I found a folder labeled VH Documentation, my initials. My hands trembled as I opened it and discovered Tiffany's evidence of my mental decline. Page after page of handwritten notes, dated and detailed. June 3rd, VH attempted to water the garden at 11 p.m., claimed she thought it was morning. When confronted, became agitated and accused me of moving the clocks. June 8th, VH forgot Susan's school pickup time, left child waiting for 45 minutes, made excuses about thinking it was Tuesday. June 15th, found VH standing in kitchen at 3 a.m., fully dressed, claiming she was getting ready for church. Became hostile when reminded it was Wednesday. Every single entry was a lie. I'd never watered the garden at night, never missed picking up Susan, never wandered around confused at 3 in the morning. But written down in Tiffany's neat handwriting, they painted a clear picture of cognitive decline. At the bottom of the folder was a business card. Dr. Marcus Brennan, geriatric psychiatrist. Someone had written, "Competency Evaluation, August 15th, on the back in Tiffany's handwriting. August 15th was next week. I photographed every page with my phone, my anger building with each fabricated incident. Then I found something that made my blood run cold, a copy of my will, with certain sections highlighted in yellow. The house, my pension beneficiary information, my life insurance policy. Beneath the will was a document I'd never seen before, a power of attorney form with my signature at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but the V in violet was wrong, and I never crossed my T's with such a sharp angle. My phone buzzed with a text message, making me jump. It was from an unknown number. "Stop looking where you don't. Belong. Some stones are better left unturned." My hands shook as I read the message. Someone knew I was in the office. Someone was watching. I quickly closed the filing cabinet, replaced the paperclip, and retreated to my bedroom. But not before I noticed something else. Tiffany's computer was still logged in, and her email was open on the screen. The most recent email was from someone named bchenfirstnational.com. Bradley Chen, the fraud specialist I was supposed to meet this afternoon tea. She called about the statements, playing confused grandmother perfectly. Meeting set for 2 p.m., will handle as discussed. B. The reply from Tiffany had been sent just an hour ago. Perfect. Stick to the script. She's getting suspicious, but the evaluation is next week. After that, we're golden. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Bradley Chen wasn't investigating the fraud. He was part of it. The bank meeting this afternoon was a trap. I heard a car in the driveway and quickly moved to my bedroom window. Tiffany's BMW was pulling up, 3 hours earlier than usual. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nathaniel. Mom, Tiffany said you called the bank about fraud? She's coming home to help sort this out. Please don't go anywhere until she gets there. I hadn't called Nathaniel, which meant Tiffany had, playing the concerned daughter-in-law worried about her confused mother-in-law's latest delusion. I heard her key in the front door, heard her calling my name in that sweet, fake voice. Violet? Where are you, honey? Nathaniel told me you're having some concerns about your bank account. Let's sit down and figure this out together. I sat on my bed, thinking fast. She didn't know that I'd seen the emails or found her documentation folder. She thought I was just a confused old woman chasing shadows, which meant I still had the element of surprise. I'm up here, dear, I called back, slipping my phone into my pocket and arranging my face into an expression of mild confusion. I'm so glad you're here. I think I may have made a mistake. It was time to start playing a role of my own. Oh, sweetheart, Tiffany said as she entered my bedroom, her voice dripping with false concern. Nathaniel told me you called the bank about some confusion with your account. You poor thing. You must be so worried. I arranged my features into what I hoped looked like embarrassed confusion. I think I may have made a terrible mistake. I was looking for my bank statements and couldn't find them, and I panicked. Tiffany sat on the edge of my bed, reaching for my hand in a gesture that looked loving, but felt like a claim of ownership. Of course you panicked. It's scary when things don't make sense anymore. When things don't make sense, I repeated carefully, letting a quaver enter my voice. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am getting confused. It's okay, she soothed, squeezing my hand just hard enough to press on yesterday's finger-shaped bruises. The important thing is that you called me instead of doing something that might embarrass the family. There it was, the threat wrapped in silk. Don't make waves, or there will be consequences. Actually, I said, playing my part, I already called the bank. I have an appointment this afternoon with someone in their fraud department. Tiffany's grip tightened imperceptibly. Oh, honey, you can't go to that appointment. You'll just confuse them with stories about fraud that isn't there. Let me call and cancel for you. But they seemed so concerned. Violet. Her voice carried a steel edge now. You are not going to that bank. You're going to stay here, and we're going to figure out together why you're having these episodes. Episodes. The word she'd been using to Dr. Alvin, the word that would appear in her fabricated documentation. Of course, I said meekly. You know best. Tiffany smiled, but her eyes remained cold. I'm going to make you some tea and then we'll call Dr. Brennan about moving up your evaluation. I think this latest incident shows we can't wait until next week. The moment she left the room, I sprang into action. I had maybe 10 minutes before she returned with the tea that I suspected would contain something to make me drowsy and compliant. I grabbed my purse, my cell phone, and the spare key to my old Honda that I kept hidden in my jewelry box. Moving as quietly as possible, I crept to the window that faced the backyard. It was a first-floor window, and though the drop was farther than I'd like, it was manageable. As I climbed through the window, I could hear Tiffany moving around in the kitchen, probably preparing my tea. My feet hit the ground harder than expected, sending a jolt of pain through my arthritic knees, but I didn't have time to worry about discomfort. I made my way around the side of the house to where my Honda sat in the garage. Nathaniel had been encouraging me to stop driving, claiming My reflexes weren't what they used to be, but I'd refused to give up my keys. Now I was grateful for that small rebellion. The car started on the first try, and I backed out of the garage as quietly as possible. It wasn't until I was 3 blocks away that I allowed myself to breathe normally. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Tiffany. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately called Alvin Rodriguez. Alvin, I need help. I've discovered something big, and I think I'm in immediate danger. Where are you? Driving around town. I can't go home. She'll drug me or have me committed. Violet, listen to me carefully. Drive to the police station on Main Street. Ask for Detective Rita Santos. She's good people and specializes in elder abuse cases. I'll call ahead and tell her you're coming. What about the bank meeting? The RAI fraud specialist is working with them. We'll handle that. Right now, the priority is getting you somewhere safe where you can tell your story to someone who will believe you. 20 minutes later, I sat in a small interview room at the police station, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that actually tasted like coffee, not whatever sedative Tiffany had probably been planning to slip me. Detective Rita Santos was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. She listened without interruption as I laid out everything: the physical abuse, the financial theft, the forged documents, the conspiracy with the bank employee. Mrs. Hartwell, she said when I finished, I need you to understand that what you're describing constitutes multiple felonies. If we're going to build a case, we need to do this right. What does that mean? It means we're going to need you to go back. My heart sank. Back to the house? Not permanently. But we need evidence. And the best way to get it is to let them think their plan is still working while we gather what we need for arrests. She leaned forward, her expression serious but encouraging. You've already done the hardest part. You've recognized what's happening and asked for help. Now we're going to help you take your life back. How? Detective Santos smiled. You're going to wear a wire. Detective Santos led me to a conference room where 3 other people were waiting. Alvin Rodriguez, a woman in a sharp business suit, and a man with a FBI badge clipped to his belt. Violet, Alvin said, standing to embrace. Me, I'm proud of you for calling. Detective Santos made the introductions. This is Agent Michelle Torres from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and this is Assistant District Attorney Patricia Weiss. When I told them about your case, they realized it might be bigger than we initially thought. Agent Torres leaned forward, her expression serious. Mrs. Hartwell, the Bradley Chen you mentioned at First National Bank, he's been on our radar for 6 months. We believe he's part of a larger elder fraud ring operating across 3 states. My jaw dropped. A ring? These operations are sophisticated, Ada Weiss explained. They target vulnerable seniors, often widows with assets. The perpetrators work in teams, someone on the inside at a financial institution, someone to gain access to the victim's daily life, and often a medical professional to provide documentation of incompetence. Dr. Marcus Brennan, I said, remembering. The business card. Tiffany has an appointment scheduled with him for my competency evaluation. Agent Torres and Detective Santos exchanged glances. We know Dr. Brennan, Santos said grimly. His license was suspended in Nevada 2 years ago for falsifying competency evaluations. He's been practicing here under a forged license. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. This wasn't just Tiffany being greedy. This was an organized criminal enterprise, and I was just one of their marks. How many others? I asked quietly. We've identified at least 12 victims across Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, Agent Torres said. Combined theft of over $2 million. But here's the thing. You're the first victim to come forward while the scheme was still active. Most victims don't realize what's happening until it's too late, Ada Weiss added. The psychological manipulation is so complete that they often don't trust their own perceptions anymore. Alvin reached across the table and patted my hand. That's why your banking background is so important, Violet. You recognize the financial irregularities that other victims might have missed. Detective Santos opened a laptop and turned it toward me. We need to show you something. These are photos from other cases. We need you to tell us if you recognize anyone. The first photo showed a brunette woman in her 30s standing next to an elderly man at what looked like a bank counter. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture, her positioning, reminded me of how Tiffany had coached me during our early interactions. The second photo made my blood run cold. It was Tiffany, but with different hair, red instead of blonde, standing next to a frail-looking woman in her 70s. They were in what appeared to be a lawyer's office. That's her, I whispered. That's Tiffany, but… Different hair, different name, Agent Torres confirmed. In Utah, she was Rebecca Morris. In Wyoming, she was Sarah Davidson. She's a professional con artist, Mrs. Hartwell. Targeting your family wasn't random. It was calculated. The room felt like it was spinning. How did she find us? Obituaries, Detective Santos said gently. They scan newspapers for recently widowed women with substantial estates. Your husband's obituary mentioned his successful business and your long marriage. It made you a perfect target. Ada Weiss pulled out another folder. We've been tracking unusual activity around Dr. Brennan's practice. In the past year, he's filed competency evaluations for 8 elderly patients. All 8 were subsequently placed under guardianship by relatives who gained control of their finances. And all 8 victims lost everything, Agent Torres added. Homes sold, savings drained, assets liquidated. The average theft per victim was between $100,000 and $300,000. I thought about my house, my savings, my pension, the life my husband and I had built over 40 years of marriage. What about my granddaughter? I asked, thinking of Susan. Is she safe? That's another reason we need to move carefully, Detective Santos said. These operations often use children as leverage. If they suspect you're working with law enforcement, they might threaten Susan's safety or claim you're an unfit guardian. Alvin leaned forward. That's why the wire is so important, Violet. We need them to incriminate themselves on tape, thinking they're still in control. Agent Torres opened a small case containing what looked like a hearing aid. This is state-of-the-art. It's virtually undetectable and will record everything within a 20-foot radius. We'll also have surveillance teams positioned around your house. What's my story? I asked, surprised by how calm I sounded. How do I explain where I've been? You got confused and went for a drive, Detective Santos said. You ended up at the shopping center, couldn't remember why you were there, and came home embarrassed. It fits with the narrative they've been building about your mental state. Ada Weiss looked at her watch. It's been 3 hours since you left. They're probably frantic, which works in our favor. They'll be so relieved to see you that they might get careless. Mrs. Hartwell, Agent Torres said, her voice serious. I need you to understand the risks. These people have already shown they're willing to use physical violence. If they suspect you're gathering evidence… I understand, I said, thinking of the bruises on my arms, the marks Tiffany had left. But I also understand that if I don't do this, they'll destroy my life and move on to their next victim. Detective Santos fitted the recording device into my ear. Remember, you're not trying to get them to confess everything at once. Just act confused and let them talk. Criminals love to explain how clever they are. As I prepared to return to the house where my son lived with a woman who wasn't his wife but a professional predator, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for 12 other victims and countless future ones. It was time to turn the tables. When I pulled into the driveway at 6:30 p.m., Nathaniel's car was already there beside Tiffany's BMW. Through the front window, I could see them both, pacing in the living room, their body language tense with what I now recognized as panic rather than concern. The tiny recording device in my ear felt both foreign and empowering. Somewhere nearby, Detective Santos and her team were listening to every word that would be spoken in the next few hours. I arranged my face into an expression of confusion and shame before opening the front door. "Mom!" Nathaniel rushed toward me, his relief palpable. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." I let my voice tremble, playing the confused elderly woman they expected to see. "I went for a drive to clear my head, and I got lost. I ended up at that big shopping center across town, and I couldn't remember why I was there." Tiffany appeared behind Nathaniel, her face a perfect mask of concern. But I caught the flash of calculation in her eyes. "Oh, honey, you must have been so scared. Come sit down." As she guided me to the couch, her grip on my arm was just firm enough to remind me of the bruises hidden beneath my sleeves. The recording device picked up her gentle, caring tone, the voice she used when others were listening. Nathaniel was just beside himself. Tiffany continued, settling beside me. "He even called the police to report you missing." My heart skipped. "The police?" "Just as a precaution," Nathaniel said, sitting across from us. "But I canceled the report when Tiffany suggested you might have just gone for a drive." "Tiffany suggested?" I repeated, looking at her with what I hoped appeared to be gratitude rather than suspicion. "I know how your mind works, Violet," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we just need to get away for a bit." Nathaniel leaned forward, his brow creased with worry. "Mom, this is exactly why Tiffany and I think you need more support. What if something had happened to you out there?" "Oh, I know you're both concerned," I said carefully. "But I feel fine. I just got a little turned around." Tiffany exchanged a meaningful look with Nathaniel. "Violet, sweetie, this is about more than getting lost. Dr. Brennan called today to confirm your appointment tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I let surprise color my voice. "I thought it wasn't until next week." "We moved it up," Tiffany said smoothly. "After this morning's episode with the bank, and now getting lost for hours, we think it's important to get you evaluated sooner rather than later." The way she said evaluated made my skin crawl. In her mind, I was already a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. "What kind of evaluation?" I asked, playing innocent. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably. "It's just to make sure you're okay, Mom. To see if there's anything we can do to help you." "Help me with what?" Tiffany's patience was wearing thin. I could see it in the slight tightening around her eyes. "Violet, we've discussed this. The memory issues, the confusion, the paranoia about money. Dr. Brennan specializes in helping families navigate these challenges." "But I don't feel confused," I protested weakly. "That's part of the problem," Tiffany said, her voice taking on a patronizing edge. "People with cognitive decline often don't recognize their own symptoms." Nathaniel nodded sadly. "Mom, you called the bank today claiming fraud when there wasn't any. You accused Tiffany of stealing your statements when they were just misfiled. These aren't normal behaviors." "I suppose you're right," I said, letting defeat creep into my voice. "Maybe I do need help." Tiffany's smile was triumphant. "That's the first step, honey. Admitting there's a problem." My phone buzzed with a text message. Tiffany immediately tensed. "Who's texting you so late?" I glanced at the phone, seeing a message from an unknown number. "Dinner tomorrow? David." Detective Santos had arranged for a colleague to send periodics, innocent messages to make me seem like I had normal social connections. "I think it's someone from church," I said vaguely. "About the potluck dinner." Tiffany held out her hand. "Let me see." "I'm sorry?" "Your phone, Violet. Let me help you respond. We don't want you accidentally sending confused messages." The request was phrased as helpfulness, but the underlying demand was clear. I handed over the phone, watching as she deleted the message without responding. "There," she said cheerfully. "One less thing for you to worry about." "Tiffany," I said quietly, "can I ask you something?" Of course. That day at the bank with the authorization forms. I really don't remember going there with you. Nathaniel. And Tiffany exchanged another look, this one more urgent. Mom? Nathaniel said gently. You went with Tiffany to add her to your account in case of emergencies. You said you wanted someone younger to help manage things if you couldn't. But I don't remember… See? Tiffany interrupted, her voice sharper now. This is exactly what Dr. Brennan needs to evaluate. Significant memory gaps, especially around important decisions. Honey, Nathaniel added, you've been forgetting a lot of things lately. Tiffany's been keeping track to help the doctor understand what's happening. Keeping track how? Tiffany's smile was predatory. I've been documenting your episodes just like Dr. Brennan suggested. Every instance of confusion, every time you've forgotten something important, every moment of paranoia or agitation. Can I see this documentation? I don't think that would be helpful, Tiffany said quickly. It might just upset you to see how many incidents there have been. But if it's about me… Violet. Tiffany's voice carried a warning now. You need to trust us. We're the ones taking care of you, making sure you're safe. All these questions, all this suspicion, it's just proving that the evaluation can't come soon enough. I looked at my son, seeing him nod in agreement with his wife. In his mind, he was protecting me from my own declining mental state. He had no idea he was helping a predator destroy his own mother. You're right, I said softly. I should trust you. You both know what's best. Tiffany's shoulders relaxed slightly. That's my girl. Now why don't you go rest? Tomorrow's going to be a big day. As I stood to go upstairs, I caught Tiffany whispering to Nathaniel. After tomorrow, everything changes. Dr. Brennan will recommend immediate guardianship, and then we can move forward with the final phase. The final phase. The word sent ice through my veins, but I kept walking steadily toward the stairs. I had what I'd come for. At midnight, I slipped out of the house through the same back window I'd used that morning. The surveillance team was expecting me. Detective Santos had arranged a signal system using my bedroom light. 3 quick flashes meant I was coming out. Steady light meant danger. Agent Torres was waiting in an unmarked sedan 2 blocks away, and within minutes I was back at the police station, sitting in the same conference room where my nightmare had begun to transform into hope. The recording is gold, Detective Santos said, playing back portions of the evening's conversation. Tiffany's voice filled the room. After tomorrow, everything changes. Dr. Brennan will recommend immediate guardianship, and then we can move forward with the final phase. What do you think final phase means? I asked, though I had a growing suspicion. Agent Torres pulled out a thick file. Based on the other cases, once they have guardianship, they typically liquidate all assets within 30 days and disappear. The victim is often moved to a substandard care facility where they're heavily medicated to prevent them from alerting authorities. Ada Weiss looked up from her legal pad. We've had 2 victims die under suspicious circumstances within 6 months of being placed under guardianship. Natural causes, according to the death certificates, but both had been healthy prior to the scheme. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They were going to kill me. We believe so, Detective Santos said gently. After they'd taken everything you owned. Alvin Rodriguez, who'd been quiet until now, leaned forward. Violet, we need to talk about Nathaniel. How much do you think he knows? It was the question I'd been dreading. I don't think he knows anything. Tiffany has him completely convinced that I'm declining mentally. He genuinely believes he's protecting me. That's what we suspected, Agent Torres said, which creates both an opportunity and a problem. What kind of opportunity? Detective Santos explained. If Nathaniel is innocent, he could be our best witness once he realizes what's been happening. His testimony about Tiffany's manipulation would be incredibly powerful. And the problem? If we move too fast and he feels betrayed or deceived, he might not cooperate. Worse, he might not believe us even when presented with evidence. Ada Weiss tapped her pen against her pad. We need to be strategic about how we reveal the truth to him. It has to come from someone he trusts, absolutely. Me, I said quietly. Yes, but not yet. First, we need to gather more evidence. Tomorrow's appointment with Dr. Brennan is crucial. Agent Torres opened her laptop and showed me a floor plan. Dr. Brennan's office is in the Meridian Medical Building, Suite 314. We've installed surveillance equipment in the hallway and reception area, but we can't get into his actual office without a warrant. Which means you'll be going in alone, Detective Santos added. We need you to get him to explain the evaluation process, to detail what he's going to recommend and why. How do I do that without seeming suspicious? Play the concerned grandmother, Ada Weiss suggested. Ask questions about what will happen to Susan if you're declared incompetent. Ask about your rights, about appeals processes. Let his ego do the rest. Alvin pulled out a small device that looked like a pen. This is a backup recording device. The one in your ear is primary, but if something goes wrong, press the top of this pen twice and it will record for up to 4 hours. What could go wrong? The room fell silent for a moment before Detective Santos answered. Dr. Brennan might recognize that you're more mentally sharp than Tiffany has reported. If he becomes suspicious, he could warn Tiffany, I finished. And they could accelerate their timeline. Which is why we're going to have teams positioned throughout the building, Agent Torres assured me. At the first sign of trouble, we'll intervene. Ada Weiss reviewed the legal strategy. Once we have Dr. Brennan on tape admitting to falsifying evaluations, we can arrest him and Bradley Chen simultaneously. That should give us leverage to get one of them to testify against Tiffany. What about the other victims? We're coordinating. With law enforcement in Utah and Wyoming, they'll make arrests there as soon as we move here. We want to shut down the entire network at once. Detective Santos checked her watch. It's almost 1 a.m. You need to get back before anyone notices you're gone. As they prepared to drive me back to the house, Agent Torres pulled me aside. Mrs. Hartwell, I need you to understand something. Tomorrow, when you're in that office, with Dr. Brennan, you'll be facing a man who has destroyed dozens of lives without remorse. If he realizes you're gathering evidence, he'll try to stop me. More than that, these people have killed before. If they think you're about to expose them, they won't hesitate to eliminate the threat. I thought about Susan, sleeping peacefully, in her bed, unaware that her mother was a predator and her grandmother was the prey. I thought about the other victims, the elderly people who'd trusted the wrong person and lost everything. I understand the risks, I said, but I also understand what happens if I don't take them. Back in my bedroom at 2 a.m., I lay in the darkness thinking about the next day. In less than 12 hours, I would sit across from a man who planned to declare me mentally incompetent so that his criminal associates could steal my life savings and possibly end my life. But this time, I wouldn't be going in as a victim. I would be going in as the hunter, not the hunted. My phone buzzed softly with a text from Detective Santos. Remember, you're not alone anymore. We've got your back. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without fear. Tomorrow, the trap would be sprung. Dr. Marcus Brennan's office was everything I'd expected from a fraudulent psychiatrist. Impressive diplomas on the walls that I now knew were fake, leather-bound books that had probably never been opened, and an air of authority designed to intimidate vulnerable patients. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his imposing desk. Please, make yourself comfortable. Tiffany has told me so much about your situation. Tiffany sat beside me, playing the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly. Thank you for fitting us in so quickly, Doctor. After yesterday's episode, we just couldn't wait any longer. Dr. Brennan nodded gravely, opening a file that already contained several pages of notes. Yes, the wandering incident is quite concerning, especially combined with the financial paranoia and documented memory lapses. Doctor, I said, letting my voice shake slightly. I need to understand what this evaluation means for my granddaughter. If something happens to me, what happens to Susan? His eyes lit up with what I recognized as predatory satisfaction. That's exactly the kind of forward thinking that shows you still have moments of clarity, Mrs. Hartwell. If we determine that you need assistance managing your affairs, guardianship would ensure that your assets are properly protected. Protected how? Your daughter-in-law would have the legal authority to make financial decisions on your behalf, he explained, his tone becoming more confident. Sell assets that are too complex for you to manage, consolidate accounts, arrange for appropriate care. Tiffany squeezed my hand. It's really for your own good, Violet. But what if I don't want that? I asked, playing confused but concerned. Dr. Brennan's smile was patronizing. Mrs. Hartwell, that's precisely the problem with cognitive decline. Patients often can't recognize their own limitations. They resist help even when it's desperately needed. So I wouldn't have a choice? Once the court declares you incompetent, no. The decisions would be made by people who have your best interests at heart. I glanced at Tiffany, who was nodding sympathetically. And how long does this process take? Oh, quite quickly in cases as clear-cut as yours, Dr. Brennan said, clearly enjoying his role as the expert. I'll file my report tomorrow recommending immediate guardianship. Given the documented incidents and your obvious confusion today, I expect the court to act within a week. A week, I repeated, letting fear creep into my voice. Now, Mrs. Hartwell, he continued, I need to ask you some questions to complete the evaluation. Let's start with your understanding of your financial situation. For the next 20 minutes, I played the role of a confused elderly woman while Dr. Brennan asked increasingly leading questions designed to demonstrate my incompetence. Every answer I gave was carefully calculated to sound just confused enough to justify his predetermined conclusion. Doctor, I said finally, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How many patients like me have you evaluated? His chest puffed with pride. Oh, dozens. It's quite common, unfortunately. Adult children bring their aging parents to me when they can no longer cope with the declining mental capacity. And what usually happens to these patients? They receive the care they need, he said smoothly. Their families gain the legal authority to protect them from their own poor judgment. And their money is properly managed by people who understand financial matters. The recording device in my ear was capturing every word of his casual admission to systematic fraud. Dr. Brennan, I said, my voice growing stronger, there's something I need to tell you. His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of wariness, crossing his features. I know exactly who you are. The color drained from Dr. Brennan's face as the office door burst open. Detective Santos and Agent Torres entered with their badges drawn, followed by two uniformed officers. Dr. Marcus Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, practicing medicine without a license, and falsifying medical documents, Detective Santos announced. Tiffany shot to her feet, her mask of concern finally slipping completely. What is this? Violet, what have you done? I've done what I should have done months ago, I said, standing and facing her directly. I fought back. Dr. Brennan was handcuffed and read his rights while Agent Torres approached Tiffany. Rebecca Morris, also known as Sarah Davidson, also known as Tiffany Hartwell, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and identity theft. My name is Tiffany Hartwell, she snarled, her sweet voice replaced by something cold and vicious. I'm married to Nathaniel Hartwell, and this woman is mentally incompetent. Actually, Agent Torres said, pulling out a tablet, your real name is Rebecca Morris and you've never been legally married to anyone. The marriage certificate you showed Nathaniel was forged. The words hit me like a physical blow. She's not married to my son? The ceremony they had in Vegas 3 years ago was performed by an actor, not a licensed officiant, Detective Santos explained. She's been committing bigamy along with everything else. Tiffany's facade cracked completely. You stupid old woman, she spat at me. Do you have any idea what you've done? We were so close to finishing this. Finishing what? I demanded. Agent. Torres pulled out a folder. We found this in her real apartment across town, the one your son doesn't know about. She showed me documents that made my blood freeze. Life insurance applications in my name, all dated within the last month. 5 different policies, each worth $500,000, with Tiffany listed as the beneficiary. After the guardianship was finalized, Agent Torres continued, the plan was to move you to a private care facility owned by their organization. You would have died there within 6 months, officially from natural causes related to your declining health. How many others? I whispered. Dr. Brennan, being led away in handcuffs, suddenly stopped and turned back. Tell them, Rebecca. Tell them about the others. Shut up, Tiffany screamed, but Dr. Brennan was done protecting her. 14 victims, he said, his voice hollow. 14 elderly people who trusted the wrong person. Total take was over $3 million. And how many died? Detective Santos asked. Dr. Brennan's shoulders sagged. 7. 7 people who would still be alive if they hadn't met her. The room fell silent except for the sound of Tiffany's labored breathing. She looked at me with pure hatred. You think you've won? Your precious son will never forgive you for destroying his life. What do you mean? Agent Torres consulted her. Notes. Nathaniel has been unknowingly living off stolen money for 3 years. The house payments, Susan's private school, even his business expenses, all funded by money stolen from previous victims. But he didn't know. The law doesn't always care about intent, Tiffany said with a cruel smile. He'll lose everything. The house, his business, maybe even custody of Susan when Child Services learns her mother is a convicted felon. As they led her away, her final words echoed in the room. Even in prison, I'll have destroyed your family. You've saved yourself but lost everything that mattered. The office fell quiet except for the sound of my own heartbeat. I'd exposed the conspiracy and saved my life, but at what cost to the people I loved most? Detective Santos put a gentle hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Hartwell, we need to go pick up your son. He needs to hear the truth from us before he hears it anywhere else. I nodded, dreading the conversation that would either save my family or destroy it forever. The hardest part wasn't facing down criminals or wearing a wire into danger. The hardest part was sitting across from my son in the police station conference room, watching his world crumble as Detective Santos explained that the woman he'd loved for 3 years was a professional con artist who'd never been his wife. That's impossible, Nathaniel kept repeating, his voice hollow. We have a marriage certificate. We had a ceremony. Susan calls her mom. The certificate was forged, Agent Torres explained gently. The ceremony was fake. Even her name was fake. But Susan? His voice broke. Susan is my daughter. Susan is your daughter, I said firmly, reaching across the table to take his hand. Nothing changes that. Detective Santos continued with the devastating revelations. Your business loans, your mortgage payments, even Susan's school tuition. All of it was paid with money stolen from elderly victims. Nathaniel pulled his hand away from mine, his face pale with shame. I'm going to prison, aren't I? Ada Weiss leaned forward. That depends on your cooperation. We believe you're a victim too, manipulated and deceived just like your mother. If you help us trace the stolen funds and testify about how Rebecca, Tiffany operated, we can work out an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Community service, restitution payments, and probation instead of prison time, she explained. But you'll have to forfeit the house and any assets purchased with stolen money. Nathaniel buried his face in his hands. Where will Susan and I live? How will I explain this to her? You'll figure it out, I said quietly. We'll figure it out together. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. All those things I said about your memory, the way I let her convince me you were losing your mind. You were. Manipulated by a professional, sweetheart. She fooled FBI agents in 3 states. You didn't stand a chance. Agent Torres placed a folder on the table. There's something else you need to know. We've recovered nearly $2 million from offshore accounts. After the other victims are compensated, there should be enough left to pay for Susan's education and give you both a fresh start. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse listening to the sentencing. Dr. Brennan received 8 years for medical fraud and conspiracy. Bradley Chen got 6 years for banking fraud. But it was Rebecca Morris, the woman I'd known as Tiffany, who received the harshest sentence. 15 years in federal prison, the judge announced, followed by 10 years supervised probation and full restitution to all victims. As the bailiff led her away, she turned and looked directly at me. But instead of hatred, I saw something that looked almost like respect. After the hearing, Detective Santos found me in the hallway. "How are you holding up?" "I'm good," I said, and meant it. "We're all good," Nathaniel had testified beautifully, helping prosecutors understand exactly how the conspiracy had worked. His cooperation had been instrumental in convicting not just our attackers, but the entire criminal network across 3 states. "And Susan?" I smiled. "She's resilient. Kids are amazing that way. She knows her mom wasn't really her mom, but she's okay with it being just her, Nathaniel, and Grandma for a while. Any regrets?" I thought about the question seriously. "Only one," I said finally. "I regret not fighting back sooner." "Mrs. Hartwell," Detective Santos said, "you saved a lot of lives by fighting back when you did." As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete freedom. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, a modest 3-bedroom house that Nathaniel, Susan, and I had chosen together. It was smaller than the house we'd lost, but it was ours, purchased with honest money and filled with genuine love. "Grandma, look!" Susan ran into the kitchen holding a drawing she'd made at school. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a big garden. "It's our family!" "It's perfect, sweetheart," I said, hanging it on the refrigerator next to her honor roll certificate and Nathaniel's Community Service Completion Award. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, home from his new job at a financial planning firm that specialized in helping fraud victims recover their assets. He'd found his calling in helping people like us rebuild their lives. "How was work?" I asked. "Good. Really good. We helped a woman today who'd been scammed by fake charity workers. Got most of her money back." He smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him since before Tiffany entered our lives. It feels good to be on the right side of things. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Santos. "Saw the news story about your victim advocacy work? You're inspiring people to fight back. Proud of you." Last month, I'd started speaking at senior centers about financial fraud prevention. My story, the marks on my arms that led to marks on a criminal's bank statement, had become a rallying cry for elderly people who refused to be victims. "What's for dinner?" Susan asked. "Whatever we want," I said, looking around at my real family in our honest home. "We have all the time in the world to decide." Outside, the garden I'd planted was blooming beautifully. The tomatoes were coming. The roses were flourishing and everything was growing exactly as it should, just like us. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.